We do need to fight for love, don't we? Anyway, welcome back. I'm Jessie Grace and I'm here till 3 on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM. Thanks for listening wherever you are. Shout out to you. Hope you're having a lovely day. I have a special guest today, Vicky Lan from Welsh Women's Aid. And we are going to be discussing the Survivors Network. So we're going to be discussing the work that she does, the amazing work that they do, and the special Survivors Network. So I'm just going to put a slight warning on that we are going to be discussing domestic violence and issues around that. If you find that you are triggered by that, then I'm just giving you a heads up now. So welcome, Vicky. How are you today?
Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me. I'm very well, thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Thanks for taking the time out and coming to talk all about the work that you do. So what's your role, first of all, with Women's Aid?
So I am the Survivor Engagement Officer for Welsh Women's Aid and cover the whole of Wales.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's quite a lot, isn't it, covering the whole of Wales? Does that mean you have to travel up and down, or can you do most things remotely?
Well, luckily, since COVID, a lot of it's done online.
Yeah.
And actually does suit a lot more people
these
days. But yeah, I do have to travel with that. So, I mean, whatever the survivors need, the survivor gets.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a bit more about this network that you have.
So the Survivor Network was set up and designed to amplify survivors' voices so that they could share their life experiences with, I guess, educating others of what happens in domestic abuse, the forms it takes, and actually to shape services that maybe let them down whilst they're going through the abuse, or actually significantly help them on their journey to recovery. So I think it's about giving them their voices back, which are taken when they're in a domestic abuse relationship, whether that's something that happened as a child or all the way through, covering all forms of abuse.
Yeah, so they've got a chance to feel heard, and it's very validating, isn't it?
It can be incredibly helpful on a journey to recovery.
Yeah.
Just not being silenced anymore.
Yeah, and feeling like you're, I don't know, like, because I did my own survivor story on this show when I first started, because I wanted to highlight like narcissism, which everybody talks about a lot more now, but it's always, I find, well, my experience was of the covert sort, so it was very difficult to pinpoint. So that did leave me feeling like I didn't have that voice. So I can really relate to that feeling of not having that voice. So how's your Survivor Network done practically then? Do you have a group? How does it work?
So currently we're at 116 women across Wales. It's essentially done by word of mouth at the moment. So there's a recruitment process where we will put who we are out there. I'll have a gentle conversation with the person who would like to join. We have a conversation. I then tell them that I am a survivor myself. I talk a little bit about my life experience and kind of all the forms of abuse that I kind of didn't associate with abuse.
Yeah.
And then enable them to kind of talk about theirs and how ready they are to engage.
Yeah.
It's not always about sharing your life experience, because you can be a part of the network and still be validated by peer support, which I find incredibly amazing when you're on your journey to recovery, to understand that you're not crazy, you're not isolated and siloed off from the rest of the community. But I also feel that there's such a family kind of connection between the women, so they don't feel so alone. So for me, it's possibly helped me in my journey in terms of any counselling I've ever had, although that helped, but to move forward and kind of progress in my life and actually not stay that victim survivor.
Yeah.
That I'm able to progress, and I've become more than what I once was, which was a shell of an existence.
Yeah.
So I encourage women to, if they want to join, it's need-led. So they decide, they make all of the decisions themselves. If they want to engage, they can. Everybody's offered the same opportunities. We just basically are led by you. And I think that's what's incredible is
Yeah.
there's so many different people, and you could have face the same abuse, but you've got an incredibly different story and take on what you've lived through, and how actually services either helped or kind of hindered your journey to recovery.
Yeah. Do you find that sometimes then? Because it's a difficult one, isn't it? You know, it's a really hard one. And like you say, like there is some, even yourself, you didn't realise some things that had happened to you were abusive.
Yeah, and I even now, when members have been a part of it for over a year, they could be listening to someone relatively new to the network while they're sharing, and still pick up on a form of abuse they didn't identify prior to that. It's not about educating women of what they've gone through, but it's being able to give a name to what you've experienced, and also looking for allies within the community. So the peer support isn't just aimed at survivors, it's those who want to get engaged with services and actually make an impact within the communities themselves.
Yeah.
So like we have bystander training and interventions to look out for the red flags if it's one of your family members. And it's about, it gives you the chance to talk through like the kind of things you come up against when you want, say, your daughter to leave an abusive relationship. You've clearly identified, but why she's not leaving, and giving you those kind of initiatives to kind of, say, for instance, make a diary of everything she talks about, of when and where, because when she leaves, that's going to be significant to kind of help her get the services to understand it's not just a one-off incident, but it's a pattern that occurs quite regularly. But she might not be ready at that point for many reasons we will never understand until she's ready to disclose why. And it could be, you know, worrying about children or lack of finances, or he controls everything. And it's how do I kind of live past this? I've not been in control of anything for years.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. And also, I think when you're in that situation, your confidence is so low. And it is hard sometimes, I think, to know who to turn to. And I think sometimes people, they might feel like they're a burden if they turn to their family, or, you know, they don't want to bother people, that kind of thing. And who do you turn to, you know, when you think, oh, I don't have the finances. And then also sometimes, yeah, it is scary to, you know, if there's children involved, because you might worry that they get taken away or something like that.
Absolutely. And I think in the midst of that chaos or war of, what I call it, a war of navigation, you're trying to understand what you're going through. Is it you? Are you crazy? Because that's what the perpetrator wants you to believe, and generally friends around you. So there's already this kind of disconnect from who you're socializing with and who you can actually lean on.
Yes.
And then it's, will they believe me? Because you feel so low of yourself that you can't understand what's happening.
Yeah, because you hear all those stories as well, like people always saying, oh, he's such a nice person, or they're such a nice person, because it's not just women who face abuse, like men do as well. I don't want to like cut anyone out of the conversation, even though you are primarily, you know, you're Welsh Women's Aid. But yes, sometimes people, the person who is the perpetrator, they don't appear that way at all in public.
Yeah, it's kind of like the hidden personality behind closed doors.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting the way in which we approach it as like bystander training is we give you the kind of red flags to look out for. We don't want you, just the tools and the ideas, because it's okay to say, why didn't she leave? She's gone back 9 times. She obviously deserves it. You don't know why she's had to go back. And I think, you know, for many reasons, I couldn't leave. I can't even tell you how many times I called the police or tried to leave before, but it was my children. And I knew what was happening when he came home. I knew what mood he was going to be in. I knew what to expect. When you leave, you're completely blindsided from what's going to happen next. And I faced far worse abuse when I left for several years after leaving, because there wasn't that understanding of post-separation abuse and how they use services.
Yes, yeah.
to control you with your children.
The fallout.
And not having any control over your children or where they were at weekends because there was the lack of understanding of what I was living. So for me, and I tell anyone, never say, like, why didn't she leave? There's so many reasons that could be.
Yeah.
And I guess identifying what you're going through is wrong is the first. But reaching out for help could be the only time they ever kind of are able to trust somebody. And if they do that, to be faced with something like, well, you should just leave. You're silly for staying.
Yeah.
And then, again, that wall goes back up to protect themselves because you're, again, reigniting what he's been teaching her for so long. I say he, like you said before, it does happen to everybody.
It's that brainwashing, I think, that it's very, it takes place over the course of a long period of time often. So you kind of lose your identity as well. Well, we're going to go to a short break now, and we will continue after the break because we have to go to the news and weather shortly. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you're listening out there, and if you've been affected by any of these, what is the number? Do you want to just read the number out that people can get in touch?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit later about the Live Fear Free helpline. But if anyone is feeling affected at the moment, please call 0808 8010
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much. So Vicky is my guest today and she's from Welsh Women's Aid, and we're talking all about the Survivors Network. So there is some sensitive topics, but thanks for tuning in. And also we'll give the helpline out again, or you can text the radio station on 07365 563 595, and we will be back right after this. That was Sedan Archives come my way, and I love her. Check her out. She's a great artist, American. She plays the violin and great artist, great performer. So welcome back. You're listening to Jessie Grace on Radio Cardiff. I'm here till 3 with my special guest, Vicky Lang from Welsh Women's Aid. And we're talking about the Survivors Network, and also another thing that they have that's very special, that isn't just for people who are suffering from domestic violence. It's for anyone who is worried in any way to call anytime. Is that right, Vicky?
It is. I will have mentioned it just prior to the song's beginning, called the Live Fear Free, and I'll just repeat the number. It's 0808 8010 800, and you can call, text, live chat or email 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. We've just got full translation services available, so
wow.
If anyone calls up with a language barrier, we can get access to that help straight away.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really good.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt them, but the great thing about the Live Fear Free is it helps everybody and anybody. You don't necessarily have to be a survivor to call them.
Yeah.
If you're a mum, dad, son, daughter, they're so amazingly trained that anything you call them about, they will help you navigate what you want to do and give you some options.
Yeah.
And they'll inform you of some reactions they may get if you try and pick out red flags to the person going through. But they're just so amazing. It helps organizations, businesses, because I think it's paramount that we're all looking after the welfare of every individual, because
I totally agree. Yeah, I think it, like we said in the break, it's not just about that one person, because it's everybody's issue.
It absolutely is. And it should be at the forefront of everyone's minds, not to be experts. But if you're running an organisation with any amount of staff, that should be something that you have a policy on and can actually have a safe space to disclose. Because I remember being in a situation where my partner just dropped my children to work. I essentially lost my job in the end, but that should never have happened. He was a right pain. He caused me endless tears in work. And I can understand from a business perspective how that would have hindered my work. But I was always amazing at my job. I never was on sick. So this individual starts showing up, dropping my children. And then all of a sudden I'm sacked after so many years of being a valued employee.
And that wasn't your fault.
Absolutely not.
And let's talk a bit about that fallout as well, because I feel like since I went through my own experience, and I had kind of like listened to a lot of resources online, especially, I'm sure you're aware of Dr. Ramani, who I think is amazing. And because you were saying before, like in the Survivors Network, sometimes when people are listening to other people's stories, they continue year after year to still recognize those pointers. Exactly the same thing for me when I was listening to that podcast, because she had a lot of guests telling their story about a lot of them are very high profile cases that have maybe been on Netflix show or something like that. But still, years later, you're still thinking, oh, that was like part of it, where you might not have realised.
Again, it's in that, I'm not sure what podcast you're talking about, but it doesn't necessarily mean I have to understand that. There's a lot of great work out there. Lots of different people who write about abuse. I'm into, but you have to understand that there's a lot of other stuff out there as well, which isn't credible, or tactics change with perpetrators, so we have to be informed of how they're changing.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we're keeping in time with current issues and training, then we can just be up to date. Like I said, we're not asking for experts, just to be aware that this is happening and it can affect anybody. And actually, unless you can say, look, are you okay? And it's just a basic question, but it's a basic principle a lot of people miss, because the amount of times I just wanted someone to ask me why I was crying, or oh, you must be hormonal, or all of the labels we get as women.
Yeah, that's a bit of like misogyny and patriarchy coming into play there, I think, as well. Like the label of the crazy woman. I'm doing brackets, commas for you guys that are listening. That's often a thing, isn't it? But that's really sad that you just felt like you just needed that one question. And that was the one question that Time to Change Wales say that you should ask people when you're approaching mental health as well. Instead of saying, how are you? Ask, are you okay?
I would rather be asked, or I would rather ask someone and be wrong, and it could just be something quite trivial, than miss that kind of opening to kind of initiate that conversation. And it doesn't matter to ask, are you okay, more than once, because if you ask once, they might not trust you then. And I know survivors who will sit on the fence and watch what's going on for many months. And then actually one day it clicks to them that actually this is helping them. And it's okay. We're not all, we need to build trust with those, but that isn't a given. We shouldn't just trust anybody who says, I work for domestic abuse, so I'm going to help you change your life, because I wouldn't have believed that. And it's okay to not want to share experiences. It's okay to just be you and just be quiet. But just, they're very observant, you're listening, and you need to always actively listen to what they want and what they want to get from it.
Yeah.
We're all different in many, many ways.
Yeah, and I think when you're living in a stressful situation, it takes a big toll on not only your physical health, but your mental health as well. So sometimes it's even hard to know what you want, like in that moment sometimes, even just to say, oh, I want this, even to be that kind of assertive when you're just living in stress, basically, because you're in a fear, you're just in flight or fight, or you're frozen, you're in all those trauma responses because you are suffering.
And it's okay to have trauma responses, but it's whether we're equipped to understand them when a woman or when anyone presents with them. So for me, it's a woman can shout or rant and rave at me and it's not personal. It never would be. But at that moment, that's what she needs to do. And I understand that. So it's a safe space for them to be who they need to be, to kind of take steps forward. And it doesn't matter how slow. You may always feel like you're going backwards because you had a small breakdown. And that it's trying to help them understand.
They do say as well that recovery isn't linear. It's like, up and down. So I think sometimes you can feel like you're going backwards, or,
I always believed I was crazy. I was on so much medication because I'd go to the doctors and I'd say, well, he's saying I'm this. I have these crazy. So
But that's what happens, isn't it?
But again, you know, if we can get in to speak to GPs about the basic ways of which, you know, sometimes the perpetrator will always be at appointments to speak for us. It's about taking back who we are and giving us our voices back. And it takes time for any person to learn who they can be after such a trauma.
Yeah, and who they're safe with.
I mean, I've met women with such incredible talents. They will never talk about them.
Yeah.
We've got singers, we've got dancers, we've got poets. And it's just incredible. But it's not until we do some confidence building and some peer support sessions that they realise that actually this is a freedom of speech place where I can express what I lived.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because I'm a musician, and I just feel like that is such an amazing outlet to have for your form of expression. But I think that when you're in one of these types of relationships, you can't express yourself. You've been shut down, you know, so your voice is kind of taken away. So I think those kind of things, to be able to come back to them, you know, whether it's poetry, music, singing, any art form where you can express yourself and say something, is so important. And it's such a great outlet for letting out some of your trauma.
Again, this doesn't happen overnight, but it's enabling the women that are in the network to be able to do that, and giving them some kind of self-reflection exercises or some well-being breathing techniques, so that if you are having a panic attack because you experience a trigger in the middle of town, that you don't go 100 steps backwards because you feel like you've let yourself down. It's a trauma response. You've either heard something or seen something or witnessed something, and it doesn't mean you have to stay, you know, go backwards. It means you can take charge, breathe carefully. And this is what the network will do for each individual, is learn the techniques that help you. Again, we're all different. There may be a million different exercises out there, but we'll identify what works for you and what works for somebody else.
That's fantastic. So you're giving people the tools to try and help cope with some of the things that they may experience, you know, when they have been through a traumatic experience or an abusive relationship. I think we're just starting to learn a lot more about trauma and how it goes into your body and how many different places and realms of one person's life it will affect, and it affects everybody in different ways. And, you know, when you've got like a complex post-traumatic stress and how that is like going to come out in your everyday life, I think we as a society or a culture, whatever, we don't necessarily know how to deal with these things. But I think today, like us having this conversation and more people talking about trauma and more trauma education being available, I think the more that we can have these conversations, the easier it will be for people to have some of those tools or identify that, you know, they might be suffering.
Yeah, I mean, we offer so many training packages for businesses, organisations, but even the communities. So we've got something called Ask Me Training, which helps individuals to improve your knowledge, your skills, to provide with inspiration and information to engage with community members. And then what, you know, you can go out and put, like, I don't know if you see them. We put them wherever we can. But the stickers,
yeah.
You know, and just sometimes that's all a woman will need to know that there's someone out there ready to listen.
Yeah.
You don't have to be experts in the field of domestic abuse. Like I said, we just equip you with the small tools you need to ask the right questions, not judge, and actually just listen. Sometimes that's all someone needs to do is listen, and then they will gauge the strength to leave when they can kind of source a safety plan or discuss with relevant services.
Yeah, I think it's important as well to, like you say, actively listen, but also just, I mean, I think if someone comes to you, you have to understand as well, like, can be a life-threatening situation, you know, if you if you were like encouraging somebody to leave, like they say that that's one of the most, dangerous parts, of when you try to leave,
It absolutely is. And there's so much research out there to what could happen. And I guess the scariest part for me is the unknown. And actually what services are going to intervene and how that's going to impact me more.
So say if someone was listening and they wanted to leave, what would you advise them? Would they ring this number?
I would definitely give them the Live Fear Free helpline.
Yeah.
Do you want me to mention it again?
Read it again.
I don't think you can say this enough. So it's 0808 8010 800. And they are so amazing at what they do and incredible in terms of you leading what happens next.
There's also a text or an email, is there? Because sometimes people can't get an access to have a private conversation or have a conversation safely. There's also web chat, isn't there? And an email, is there?
Yeah, so the email is info@livefearfreehelpline.wales. Web chat is livefearfree.gov.wales. All of this is on the website, and you can safely leave that chat without anyone seeing your history on your phone or any device.
Yeah.
So there is a way you can leave that page if it's not safe to look at.
Yeah.
So it's all on there, and actually the most incredible thing you will be met with is that non-judgmental, kind voice that isn't trying to make decisions for you, but giving you your options and telling you what could happen next, or what do you want them to do next.
Yeah.
So it's not dictative, it's not judgmental, and it's incredible at how many people, whether you're police, can ring and get advice based on something that's like maybe
that's
negative.
I was gonna mention that, because a lot of the time police just get, like, if there's a problem, it's always like, oh well, if you are scared, call 999. But the police as well at the moment, they haven't had a great time in the press, and I think that sometimes it might be hard for somebody to, like you say, trust what's going to happen. So it's great that the police can ring as well and get some tips and tools on how to, deal with domestic abuse situations. I mean, I'm sure they get a lot of training as well, but
I think it's important for us to realise that, police may be called out for mistakes they make, but they also do some incredible work in the background.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So for me, it's, you may have been failed once by the police, but let's hope it's not going to do it again. And kind of reach out when you need help, because they do call the helpline if it's a situation they're unsure about.
Yeah.
And they are doing training, but again, vicarious trauma, when they're going out to incident after incident after incident.
It's so hard, isn't it? Yeah.
It's important that the police force look after their own as well, so that we don't become complacent or robotic in any job.
Yeah.
But I think it is important that all we hear in the press is bad stuff. From the network's perspective, we will share any positive practice that has worked, where the officer has been absolutely phenomenal, asked all the right questions, never used judgmental words, because I think it's that you could be like, why did you not leave? That would just put you straight back in a box, and you wouldn't speak again to that officer.
No.
So that use of language in that first meeting
really
can be incredibly helpful when you're disclosing what's happened.
Yeah.
But it's about being aware, and South Wales Police have been amazing. They just from the work we've done with them recently.
That's fantastic. That's really good for the listeners to know as well, if anyone is in that situation, to know that you're in touch, and it's not this big, just to feel more confident that there is people out there who will listen and they have got the right training. So that's really excellent. Right, I'm going to play a song now, and then we'll go to the news and weather again, and we will be back. So you're listening to Jessie Grace on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM. We'll be back after this. I'm Jessie Grace, and you are listening to Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM. I hope you're having a lovely afternoon, and I'm with the great Vicky Lang for Welsh Women's Aid, and we're talking all about how to get help if you are in a situation that isn't a great situation with domestic violence, or if you are worried about somebody else, or if you need training or anything like that, because Welsh Women's Aid do an amazing job, and they are all over Wales, not just in Cardiff or South Wales. They're everywhere. And this number that we've got is for everybody. It is not restricted at all, is it? And it's nationwide.
And it's the Live Fear Free, and it's 0808 8010800.
Brilliant. And in the break, we were also saying how sometimes you were saying you set up a food bank during COVID to help people. Obviously, when they had COVID, they couldn't get out of the house. But that ended up being a place where people were talking, and it was like a safe place. So look, sometimes you might be volunteering somewhere, or somebody listening might be volunteering somewhere, and they might need the training, the ask training, because they might have people coming in, and they might be in a position where somebody does make a disclosure of some sort.
Yeah, I think what we were talking about in the break was how we think outside the box as members of the community.
Yeah.
And that's how the food bank came up. So I see a lot of heating hubs where people can go along to and sit and keep warm because of the cost of living crisis, for instance. And I think if we make it our business in our everyday life and just have domestic abuse at the forefront, is that we make steps to be visible, that we may not be experts, but we have the information to hand. So the Live Fear Free poster on your wall could be all that somebody would need. I mean, if your business or organisation or any kind of publicity event that you hold needed anything like that, we can, you just email us at Welsh Women's Aid and we'll get you whatever you need, whether that be pens, lip balms. We have everything with the Live Fear Free on it.
Yeah.
You just request that from us at Welsh Women's Aid. We, like I said earlier, just mention it again, the Ask Me training, which is for community to be kind of ambassadors and put stickers up and just to have that knowledge to hand if someone was to disclose. Like, I never dreamed of setting up a food bank in my spare time thinking that someone was going to disclose domestic abuse, but during COVID it had me thinking that this 20 minutes where they come to my home, get food, is the only time they get away from their abuser. So in COVID, although I didn't think of it, I quickly turned that around and made it my business to be more aware and be more visible, that I may not be the best expert in the world, but actually I can make a difference to my community. I live in a rural area, which always has their own judgments and stigmas. Yeah. And then we had so many disclosures within the first week of having the posters on the window. And for me, that was when I had a light bulb moment.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. Because I do a lot of work, I'm always saying community is unity, and because it's not just about the most obvious things. And like you said, you kind of adapted to that situation quite quickly, and you will have made a difference in those people's lives. So I think we can all make a difference, like wherever we are in our communities. And I think that's really, really important, because coming out of COVID especially as well, because we've been isolated from each other, and that isolation is very hard, and particularly is a tactic as well that abusers use, that isolation tactic, because it is bad for you, like overall, like your well-being. So basically, that coming together and that community spirit where you've adapted there, that's something that really should be valued very highly, because I think that we have all been cut off in some kind of way from having those conversations, because we've been in a little bit of a space of fear. I don't know how you feel about COVID, but I still feel like it's affecting people still.
Yeah, and I guess perpetrators didn't need a hand in isolating anybody else then, did they? There wasn't an excuse to leave the house. Yeah. So it's got a lot to answer for. But again, it's how can we be united? How can we send the same consistent message that the Live Fear Free will help you, will help you understand, and can direct you in whatever direction you need? They're not to take charge. And it does advise anybody, and it is 24 hours a day. And I guess that's brilliant. the good thing about the Live Fear Free. I mean, I could go on all day about it.
But I mean, it's really good because it does get confusing sometimes. And if you're in a situation where you are in danger, or it affects your cognitive function as well. So if it's one number for the whole country that isn't, is available to everybody 24/7, then you don't even have to think. You don't have to think. Oh, what's the number? What's the number? It's that number.
Well, you may have to think, but the other hand is there's like a lip balm, there's a pan, there's we've spoken with other agencies on how they can have a visible number at the end of their emails, and it's for everybody. So it's not segregating or isolating individuals who may need help. It's given out to the world.
Yeah.
And it's helpful because it doesn't look like you're taking a pan home that. Why have you got a domestic abuse number? And then that's another battle you have to fight behind the doors. Yeah. But if everyone's given one and everyone, makes it their business, it's less.
And it's more normalised, It's just that's where it is, because I think that, changing cultures is really difficult, and these are difficult subjects and issues to deal with. But I wanted to also just talk about the actual Survivors Network, because it sounds like fantastic group, and if anybody out there was listening and maybe they wanted to join, how they would do that, and some positive stories, if you like, from that group, if you could share.
So some positive things to come. It's probably the most active survivor network I'm aware of in Wales. There are some amazing groups out there. There's 116 that engage really frequently. And it tends to work more because you don't have this cliquey situation. Everybody's on a level. Nobody sees me as the lead. They just see me as one of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the incredible thing about it. There's no hierarchy. Nobody who's better. Nobody who's louder. And it's a free space to share and share what you want. So if you've had a really discouraging day, you can share and not be judged. We can talk through it. If you're going through, say, issues with family court and there's someone with experience with the same papers, they can talk through it privately, or, we can do it as a group. Okay, how should we act? We can get more advice for them with our member services, which are amazing, incredible on the ground.
Yeah.
Frontline workers who do amazing work day in, day out. Again, funding is an issue. And there are postcode lotteries out there, which we're all aware of. But if we make it our business, we can kind of fill those holes with our knowledge to ensure that those who need it, wherever you are, rural area or in the middle of town, that the number is very visible and make a difference to those. So we do a lot of activism. We go to consultations with the police, with the fire, with ambulance, with NHS boards. Whoever will work with us and have the survivor at the heart of that, which is kind of our model. We value survivors' voices, and it has to be at the heart of our work. We developed a survivor engagement toolkit, which I'm immensely proud of. It's all of the survivors' voices, everything in there, from how we work to how we arrange meetings to even having wellbeing days, which is a focus on just them and who they are. We work with frontline services to make sure they're getting it right, because it is tough when you're stretched to full capacity and having a caseload that's so high. But it's
definitely
how do we stay on top of that and treat every individual case on a needs-led basis?
Our frontline services are so under pressure at the moment, so that's great that they're getting extra insight from some of you guys. So do you meet online? It sounds like a really great network. Do you meet on online meetings, or did you say like you sometimes do things in real life as well?
Oh, if we can meet in real life, we'll do that, because a lot of the members prefer it. But rather than miss out, if they have to travel quite far and it's an evening meeting, we'll suggest they still come into the meeting, but they do it online. So we'll have half and whatever
half
suits.
Yeah.
But it's about having those options.
Yeah.
We've got deaf survivor who has BSL interpreters at every event, so she totally understands. We're always working out how we can be more inclusive, and that's with having survivors who need translation services, and committed to carry on to continue to grow that way. So I guess it's getting into all those hard to reach groups, the marginalised groups, establishing what the problems they're facing. Yeah. And that's from survivors'
so it might
voices.
be like different cultural people from different cultural backgrounds facing different issues, different types of problems that, maybe like I might not understand or might not know about.
It's different forms of abuse at the end of the day, and we have to cater for them as well. So we have the knowledge, we have the training, we just need the survivors to share with us what their problems, what they are facing directly, so that we can put the implementations in place based on a needs-led basis. Yeah. So whether that's a language barrier, whether they can't speak out because their community, say FGM or forced marriage, we need to establish what the problems are, where they would feel safe, how we can help that happen. And then we talk to services about changing the way they work to shape a more inclusive and accessible service. Yeah. And that's how we shape how we work.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're working with survivors, because I think that part of the healing process is, you've got to, if you help others, basically, it helps you heal as well. So that side to it, because I feel like you feel like you're giving back something.
I think from the women themselves, the feedback's it's been an incredible journey, to actually be able to speak out about their experiences, but also to just be themselves. It's a safe space to not worry about children, not worry about their daily jobs, because there are stigmas out there that it only happens to women in council estates with no jobs and they don't have education.
I think that's a dangerous stigma, to be honest, because I think that it can happen to anyone.
And that's exactly the message we set out. It's everybody's business because it could happen to you. And it's incredible how many women don't speak and are silenced, whether it's for the job because they fear that they may lose their job, or they don't want to be judged unnecessarily. And it may be something they never face if they share, but that's something we carry as individuals. And I guess we only know who we can talk to from actually the lack of awareness. So if we can create the awareness in organisations and businesses, and I think more women will speak and trust.
Yeah, definitely. So that Survivors Network is just women, isn't it? And it's you can access it anywhere throughout Wales.
Yeah, you have to be over 18.
Okay.
Purely because of the things we discuss.
Yeah.
But also you have to be away from the perpetrator. So there's no risk to going back, because we wouldn't want to send you emails that could put you in more danger. Needless to say, some women have come forward and said, I'm in the middle of leaving, and we've given them the Live Fear Free helpline to kind of talk through what they need to do. And when they are free, then they can come back to the network. So we're not totally saying you can't, but it has to be safe for them. Yeah. And if we're emailing like regular updates or anything we achieve, we've got a woman who's amazing, and she's done sculptures with metal, and it's parts of the body, and it's her take on what domestic abuse does to your body, whether that's the heart, lungs. It's amazing. And
wow, that sounds amazing.
And she's done that since leaving abuse, and I know she'd be happy for me to share it, so I can share that later with an update.
Oh wow.
And the website for you to take a look.
And your song.
Oh,
I want to hear the song.
We do have a song. Yeah.
Can you send it to me?
I can. It's called Free. Remind me later.
We should have played it on the.
We should have.
Radio. I didn't know you'd done a song. Otherwise, I would have asked for that. Definitely.
Well, it was to promote our empowerment event last year. Yeah. A lot of work went into it, but I think it just narrows down. It's got survivors' voices in there from their own stories, and there's 100 women backing singers from across Wales and the world who are backing singers in the back. Everyone is a survivor, so everyone who made it is a survivor.
That's fantastic. That's really so cool.
But we have a survivor event to celebrate International Women's Day on the 8th of March.
Okay.
It is closed, but if survivors want to come, they can.
Yeah, so how do people join your Survivors Network? Say if they were listening and they thought, well, that sounds really right up my street and like something that I could benefit from.
So they can email me
at
vickylang@welshwomensaid.org.uk, or they could get in contact with the Welsh Women's Aid email and say, I'd like to know more about it.
Yeah.
And then I will personally email them back.
Okay. Did you get that, folks?
It's Vicky, Vicky, Lang, Lang, @welshwomensaid.org.uk.
Brilliant. That's great. And have we missed anything out, Vicky, from today? Is there anything else that you want to talk about quickly before? Because this show keeps going so quickly. I've just got time for a couple more songs before the end of the show.
Jess, I could go on for days, days and days.
Oh.
It's so important. And I just think if you take anything from this show, that the Live Fear Free is available 24 hours a day.
I'm going to say the number. I'm going to say it
Let
again.
Jess do it. Go on.
0808 80 10 800. It's 0808, which makes me think of a keyboard because I'm a musician. 80 10 800. There is a text as well, which is 078 77 333. That's 078 77 333. And there's a web chat, livefearfree.gov.wales. So thank you so much, Vicky, for coming in and telling us all about the amazing, incredible work that you do. And I'm looking forward to that song. And yeah, don't forget those numbers. If you are worried, if you're out there, if you're worried about anybody or anything, you can ring that number. And I don't know where that music's coming from, but I'm going to play another song now, and I will see you soon next week. Take care. Until then, bye.